sort of entry-level media triangle for these kids. And so there'd be these questions posted all over my corkboard, so under media text, it would be, what is...
Looking at the angles of these and where the ads are coming from, this creates quite a bit of a conversation for you in your classroom. So some of the things that you can do with this, we have some ideas for language arts. So making inferences and establishing a point of view is a very big part of your language curriculum. You could be asking things like, do you think the advertisements are effective? Why or why not? What message is the author sending? How do you know that? Does each pose influence your feelings about milk and the message being relayed? Whose voice is missing? Whose is not being represented? And that's a very big question you want to ask. Not always about what's obviously there, but also what's not there. Right?
A commercial or maybe not another medium. And the thing is, when we see commercials, we're either at home alone or we are with our family, maybe with friends, and we're not going to talk about this commercial. We're going to be like, oh, that was interesting. But to actually deconstruct it in a class, if this was used for educational material, then you would actually break it down. And in a classroom, you could say, you probably thought that kid was going to steal, let's say like 90% of us thought had a negative impression of this person. We could also break it down after and then realize as a group that there are stereotypes that are attached, and you wouldn't get that at home. You wouldn't get the same experience.
Very true.
So my question initially today is, how do you apply media studies to thematic units in literature? So if you're an English teacher, we know, okay, well, I've got to teach Shakespeare, or I've got to teach a novel, or I've got to teach a short story, or what have you. So how do I make that into media? So my big point today is that one example, and there's many, is if you can be discussing what we call representation. How are people shown in these stories? And so then you can make the comparisons between the literature that we're studying and then our popular culture and the media that we're exposed to. Students can make that very quick connection.
Of course, we went back to conventions and techniques, and so we looked for this, and we looked for how did you use titles, and how did you use the sequencing? How did you share information with your audience? What if your audience was deaf? Would they be able to follow the sequence of your cooking show? And so then the titles and the sequencing became really, really important to the overall message of the piece. And of course, thinking about the target audience, who weren't necessarily deaf, but were our fellow students. So again, what language choices have you made to be speaking to your peers? Could somebody watch your show and make this stick?
So just kind of stretch their thinking. And we said, would you do that in your own family? Some of them said yeah. Some of them said no. I've never done that to my dad. Like, I would be in so much trouble. But my mom is okay. Right? So, anyways,
now in Toronto, because Rob Ford won't go away. For a lot of really good reasons, people can't get him to stop. He's a really interesting message. He's not a good or bad, he's interesting. Really interesting. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention to his footwear and his ties. Because his footwear and his ties don't send the same message that the suits send. They speak to a different demographic.
You know Pele, and suddenly I'm in her world, right? Because I've made that kind of connection. Media literacy will allow you to make that connection because you're making sure that you value what they appreciate. Okay?
I've never seen her sleep during class, but she got the joke.